Wait a minute, I smashed my finger with a hammer, pop an ibuprofen, and somehow this pill navigates through my entire body and makes the pain disappear? Like, how does it say, yes, the injured finger, that's my destination? This sounds less like medicine and more like some kind of molecular GPS system. But here's the thing. What they're really doing is way more clever and frankly a bit sneaky. The pain you feel in your finger isn't even happening there. It's all constructed in your brain. Let me show you how your brain and body team up to create the sensation of pain, starting with what happens the moment you swallow that pill. The great stomach acid showdown. Your ibuprofen just took the plunge down your throat, and now it's about to face what might be the most hostile environment in your body. Your stomach acid is incredibly acidic, which puts it in territory where most things get completely obliterated within minutes. But here's where things get interesting. That pill isn't just sitting there hoping for the best. Pharmaceutical companies in 2025 have turned stomach survival into an art form. They've developed these incredibly sophisticated coating systems that make pills way more resilient than the basic tablets your grandparents used to take. Some of these new formulations can actually control exactly when and where they start breaking down, almost like they have tiny molecular timers built right into them. Modern ibuprofen tablets now dissolve in your stomach in about 15 to 30 minutes, but that timing isn't random. It's precisely engineered. The 2025 research shows that newer formulations have improved this process so much that bioavailability rates have jumped from around 80% to over 95% for most major painkillers. That means way more of your pill actually makes it to where it needs to go, instead of getting wasted along the way. The really clever part is something called enteric coating. This is basically a protective shell that completely ignores your stomach acid but dissolves when it reaches the higher pH environment of your small intestine, delaying absorption until past the stomach. It's like the pill is wearing a hazmat suit that only comes off when it reaches safer territory. These coatings didn't even exist in older painkillers, which is why people used to get so many stomach problems from taking too many pain pills. Then you have time-release mechanisms that are even more sophisticated. These pills contain tiny pellets with different coating thicknesses, so they dissolve at different rates over several hours. Some pellets dissolve immediately, others wait 2 hours, others wait 4 hours. It's like having multiple pills inside one pill, each one launching at exactly the right moment to keep your pain relief steady throughout the day. But here's the part that seems completely backwards. Your stomach acid isn't actually trying to destroy your painkiller. All that dissolution and chemical breakdown is absolutely necessary for the pill to work. The active ingredient needs to escape from its tablet prison and become individual molecules floating around in your stomach juices. Solid pill can't do anything useful. It needs to be chemically dismantled before it can start its real job. The 2025 absorption data shows just how much this matters. Pills that dissolve faster don't necessarily work better, and pills that dissolve slower don't necessarily work worse. It's all about timing and location. The goal is to get maximum dissolution at exactly the right spot in your digestive system where absorption happens most efficiently. Your stomach is basically performing controlled demolition on that pill. The acid breaks down the binding agents that hold the tablet together, and the churning action grinds everything into smaller and smaller pieces. Within about 20 minutes, what used to be a solid pill is now thousands of microscopic particles suspended in your stomach contents. But not everything dissolves at the same rate. Different parts of the pill have different chemical structures, so they break down according to their own individual schedules. The active painkiller ingredient might dissolve first, followed by the binding agents, then the coating materials, then the coloring agents. It's like watching a carefully choreographed chemical dance where each component has its own entrance and exit timing. Modern pill design takes advantage of this process by creating tablets with specific hardness levels and breaking points. Too hard and the pill won't dissolve fast enough. Too soft and it might break down before it even reaches your stomach. The 2025 formulations hit that sweet spot where the tablet is strong enough to survive manufacturing and packaging, but weak enough to surrender quickly to your stomach's chemical assault. What's really fascinating is that different types of painkillers have completely different dissolution strategies. Aspirin dissolves almost immediately because it needs to get to work fast. Extended release formulations can take hours to fully dissolve because they're designed to provide long-lasting relief. Enteric-coated pills don't dissolve at all in your stomach, saving themselves for the small intestine environment. The byproducts of this dissolution process aren't just random debris either. Everything that comes out of a dissolving pill serves a specific purpose. Some components are designed to enhance absorption, others control the release rate, and others protect the active ingredient from being damaged by stomach acid. It's like the pill is a tiny factory that only starts operating once it gets attacked by your digestive system. But here's where the real mystery begins. Once your stomach has finished demolishing that pill and turning it into a soup of dissolved molecules and microscopic particles, all that material has to find its way through a very specific gateway to continue the journey. Your stomach is essentially a holding tank with only one exit, and that gateway has its own set of rules about what gets to pass through and what gets left behind. Highway to the bloodstream. That gateway leads to your small intestine, where the real molecular selection process begins. Your small intestine isn't just some passive tube that lets everything through. It's actually one of the most selective bouncers in your entire body, and it has very specific rules about what gets to pass and what gets rejected. The wall of your small intestine is covered in these tiny finger-like projections called villi, and each villus is covered in even tinier projections called microvilli. All that surface area exists for one reason, to give your body maximum opportunity to absorb the stuff it needs while filtering out the stuff it doesn't want. But absorption isn't just about surface area. Your intestinal wall contains hundreds of different transport proteins, and these proteins are like highly specialized gatekeepers. Each type of transport protein only recognizes specific molecular shapes, kind of like locks that only work with certain keys. The 2025 research has identified over 400 different transport proteins in the human small intestine, and we're still discovering new ones. Some of these proteins actively grab onto drug molecules and pull them through the intestinal wall, while others act as barriers to keep certain molecules out. What makes this even more interesting is that different painkillers use completely different strategies to get through this intestinal security system. Ibuprofen molecules are just the right size and shape to slip through passive diffusion pathways, meaning they don't need any special transport proteins to help them. They just squeeze through tiny gaps between cells like molecular ninjas. But other painkillers need active transport, where specific proteins have to physically carry them across the intestinal barrier. The selectivity process is brutal. Studies from 2025 show that only about 60 to 80% of dissolved painkiller molecules actually make it through the intestinal wall. The rest get either broken down by intestinal enzymes or swept away by the constant flow of digestive juices moving through your gut. It's like a molecular obstacle course where most participants get eliminated before they even reach the finish line. Once those lucky molecules do make it through the intestinal wall, they don't go directly into your general bloodstream. Instead, they get collected by a specialized blood vessel system called the portal circulation. This is basically a private highway that carries everything absorbed from your intestines directly to your liver before it goes anywhere else in your body. Your liver gets first dibs on everything you absorb, which sounds helpful until you realize that your liver's job is to break down and eliminate foreign substances. Your liver contains the highest concentration of drug-metabolizing enzymes in your entire body. These enzymes have names like cytochrome P450, and they're essentially molecular shredding machines designed to tear apart foreign chemicals. When painkiller molecules arrive at your liver, they face what's called first-pass metabolism. This is where your liver immediately starts breaking down a portion of the drug before it ever gets a chance to reach the rest of your body. The numbers on first-pass metabolism vary dramatically between different painkillers. For some drugs, your liver destroys up to 70% of the absorbed medication during this first encounter. But ibuprofen is actually pretty good at surviving this process, maintaining about 95% bioavailability. That means if 100 milligrams of ibuprofen made it through your intestinal wall, about 95 milligrams will survive the liver's initial screening process. This is why pharmaceutical companies have to account for liver metabolism when they design pill dosages. They're not just calculating how much drug you need for pain relief. They're calculating how much you need to compensate for what your liver is going to eliminate. But your liver isn't just randomly destroying painkiller molecules. It's actually performing quality control. The liver breaks down drugs into metabolites, and some of these metabolites are actually more active than the original drug. Other metabolites are designed to be easily eliminated by your kidneys. Your liver is basically a chemical processing plant that converts the raw materials from your pill into the specific molecular products your body can safely handle and effectively eliminate. After surviving the liver screening process, whatever remains of your dissolved painkiller finally enters what's called systemic circulation. This is the main highway system of your bloodstream that connects to every organ and tissue in your body. Your heart pumps about 5 liters of blood through this system every minute, creating a circulation loop that can carry molecules throughout your entire body. But even reaching systemic circulation doesn't guarantee success. Your bloodstream contains proteins that can bind to drug molecules and essentially put them in temporary storage. A significant portion of painkiller molecules in your blood are bound to these proteins at any given time, which means they're circulating through your body, but they're not actually available to do anything useful. Only the unbound molecules can exit your bloodstream and interact with tissues where pain is actually happening. The whole process from intestinal absorption to systemic circulation takes about 30 to 45 minutes for most modern painkillers. That timing has improved significantly since 2025 because of better understanding of transport proteins and metabolic pathways. Pharmaceutical companies now design pills specifically to optimize each step of this journey, from intestinal absorption rates to liver metabolism patterns. What's really mind-blowing is that this entire absorption and distribution system happens automatically every time you swallow any pill. Your body doesn't know whether you're taking a painkiller, a vitamin, or a completely inert sugar pill. It just follows the same molecular highway system regardless of what you've consumed. The selectivity happens at the molecular level based on chemical properties, not based on what you intended the pill to accomplish. Your bloodstream has become a molecular highway system with multiple lanes, checkpoints, and quality control stations. The molecules that do make it through this gauntlet are now circulating throughout your entire body. But here's where something really strange starts to happen. The everywhere problem. Your bloodstream is now carrying these molecules to literally every single part of your body. Your toes, your earlobes, your kidneys, your brain, everywhere. But wait, if I smash my thumb with a hammer, why is the painkiller going to my spleen? This seems like the most inefficient delivery system ever invented. This is the part that makes painkillers seem like magic because logically it makes no sense. You take one pill for a headache, and that same pill is simultaneously visiting your liver, your muscles, your bones, and about 37 trillion other cells that have absolutely nothing to do with your headache. It's like calling for pizza delivery and having the delivery guy stop at every single house in your neighborhood before finally reaching yours. But your cardiovascular system doesn't have any kind of GPS functionality. Blood just flows where blood flows, following the same circulatory routes it always follows, regardless of where you happen to be experiencing pain. Your heart doesn't pump harder toward injured areas, and your blood vessels don't create special express lanes for painkiller molecules heading to specific destinations. Once in your blood, the drug travels everywhere equally, reaching both injury sites and non-injured tissues. This systemic distribution is actually more sophisticated than it seems. What determines where these molecules end up first isn't your pain location, it's your blood flow patterns. Organs with the highest blood flow get the highest concentrations of painkiller molecules the fastest. Your brain, heart, liver, and kidneys see peak drug concentrations within the first 30 minutes simply because they receive the most blood per minute. Meanwhile, tissues with lower blood flow like cartilage, tendons, and bone take hours to reach peak drug concentrations. This creates a really interesting paradox. The places where you most commonly experience pain, like joints and muscles, are often the places that receive painkiller molecules last and in the lowest concentrations. Your knee cartilage has relatively poor blood supply, so it might take 2 to 3 hours for painkiller concentrations to peak there. But your brain, which processes the pain signals from your knee, gets flooded with painkiller molecules within the first few minutes. The tissue concentration data from 2025 studies reveals some surprising numbers. In highly vascularized organs, painkiller concentrations can reach 10 to 15 times higher than the average blood concentration. But in poorly vascularized tissues, concentrations might only reach 10 to 20% of blood levels. So the drug isn't distributed evenly throughout your body at all. It's more like a flood that hits some areas with tsunami-level concentrations while barely trickling into others. But here's the thing that makes this seemingly wasteful system actually brilliant. Different tissues have different barriers to drug penetration, and the everywhere approach compensates for these barriers by providing multiple pathways for the drug to reach its targets. Your blood-brain barrier normally keeps most chemicals out of your brain, but the everywhere approach means painkiller molecules are constantly encountering this barrier from multiple directions, and eventually some of them get through. What's really fascinating is that the everywhere distribution isn't actually wasteful at all when you understand what's happening at the molecular level. Pain isn't just happening at the injury site. It's happening throughout your entire nervous system, from the peripheral nerves at the injury location all the way up to the pain processing centers in your brain. The everywhere approach ensures that painkiller molecules are available to interrupt pain signals at every point along this pathway. The mechanism behind pain relief isn't about the painkiller finding your injury and fixing it. It's about the painkiller being available wherever pain signals are being generated, transmitted, or processed. Pain signals travel through peripheral nerves, up your spinal cord, and into multiple brain regions. The everywhere approach stations painkiller molecules at every stop along this journey, ready to interfere with pain signal transmission wherever it's happening. Recent 2025 data on pain pathway research shows that effective pain relief requires drug action at multiple sites simultaneously. Blocking pain signals at just the injury site provides minimal relief because the pain amplification happens throughout the nervous system. But having painkiller molecules distributed everywhere means they can block pain signals in peripheral nerves, spinal cord relay stations, and brain processing centers all at the same time. This creates a compound effect where the pain relief is much greater than what you'd get from targeting any single location. It's like having a security system with cameras and alarms at every possible entry point instead of just monitoring the front door. Most attempts to break in get stopped at multiple checkpoints, making the overall system much more effective than any single point of protection. The distribution kinetics also work in your favor, in ways that aren't immediately obvious. As painkiller molecules get metabolized and eliminated from highly vascularized organs, the drug concentrations in poorly vascularized tissues are still building up. This creates a sustained release effect where pain relief continues even as blood drug levels are declining. Your circulatory system essentially becomes a molecular distribution network with millions of delivery points operating simultaneously. Each blood vessel, each capillary bed, each tissue interface becomes a potential site where only free drug molecules can leave blood vessels and reach tissue receptors. The everywhere approach turns your entire cardiovascular system into a massive parallel processing pain relief operation. The sophistication of this system becomes obvious when you realize that it works for different types of pain simultaneously without any additional coordination required. Whether you have a headache, a sore muscle, and a small cut all at the same time, the same painkiller molecules distributed throughout your body can address all three pain sources concurrently. No targeting required, no coordination needed, just millions of molecular repair crews deployed everywhere and ready to work wherever they encounter pain signals. But there's something about this whole process that doesn't quite add up. If painkillers are flooding your entire body, why do you only feel relief in the places that actually hurt? Pain's secret identity crisis. The answer lies in understanding what pain actually is and where it really happens. You stub your toe and feel pain in your toe, right? Not exactly. Pain signals originate in injured tissue, but the conscious experience is created in brain circuits about 3 feet away from where you think it's happening. Your toe sends the distress signal, but your brain writes the pain story. This completely flips everything we think we know about pain on its head. When you touch a hot stove, the burning sensation feels like it's happening right there on your fingertip. But that's just your brain's incredibly sophisticated interpretation system. The actual experience of burning is being constructed entirely within your cranium by electrical signals and chemical reactions that translate tissue damage into conscious suffering. The 2025 neuroscience research has confirmed what sounds like science fiction. Brain imaging studies using advanced fMRI technology can now watch pain being manufactured in real time inside people's heads. They can see the exact moment when electrical signals from an injury get interpreted into the conscious experience of hurt. The brain regions that light up during pain processing are completely separate from the body part that's actually damaged. Scientists can literally watch your brain interpret incoming signals as pain. When researchers showed people virtual nature scenes while they were experiencing controlled pain stimuli, the brain scans revealed something incredible. The brain's interpretation of those pain signals was significantly reduced just by looking at pretty pictures. The injury was exactly the same, but the brain decided to process the incoming information differently. The pain processing pathway starts with specialized nerve cells called nociceptors that detect tissue damage and send electrical signals through your spinal cord to your brain. Your brain then constructs the pain experience using multiple regions, including the thalamus, somatosensory cortex for location and intensity, and emotional centers that make the experience unpleasant and motivating. But if you want to see just how much pain depends on brain interpretation, look at phantom limb pain. People who have had arms or legs amputated often continue to feel excruciating pain in body parts that literally don't exist anymore. The limb is gone, completely absent, but the brain keeps generating pain sensations and projecting them onto empty space. This shows the brain can generate pain without any actual injury present. Think about what this means. A person can have absolutely nothing wrong with their body, no tissue damage, no inflammation, no injury of any kind, and still experience pain so severe it interferes with their daily life. The pain is completely real from their perspective, but it's being generated entirely by brain circuits that are essentially creating the experience from memory patterns. Your brain constructs the experience of pain from electrical signals the same way it constructs the experience of vision from light waves, or the experience of hearing from sound waves. Pain isn't something that gets transmitted from your body to your brain like a package being delivered. It's something that gets created by your brain using information from your body. The difference is huge. The 2025 understanding of pain processing shows just how complex this construction process really is. When you get injured, the electrical signals travel through multiple relay stations and get distributed to different brain regions that each contribute specific aspects to the final pain experience. The somatosensory cortex handles location and intensity information. The anterior cingulate cortex adds the emotional component, making the pain feel unpleasant and motivating you to do something about it. The insular cortex integrates everything into a unified conscious experience. But here's where evolution shows its twisted logic. Why would natural selection design a system where pain gets processed in your head instead of at the actual injury site? It seems incredibly inefficient to have all pain signals travel all the way to your brain just to get interpreted and then have response signals travel all the way back to coordinate a reaction. The answer is that centralized pain processing gives your brain incredible power to modify and control the pain experience based on context. If pain happened locally at injury sites, it would be the same intensity every time regardless of the situation. But centralized processing allows your brain to turn pain up or down depending on what's happening around you. Soldiers in combat often don't feel injuries until after the fighting stops because their brains are suppressing pain signal interpretation to keep them functional. Your brain can also amplify pain when it decides that's necessary. The 2025 data on chronic pain conditions shows that about 50 million adults in the United States experience chronic pain, and most of these conditions involve the brain amplifying pain signals far beyond what's actually happening in the tissues. Conditions like fibromyalgia produce widespread pain even though there's no detectable tissue damage anywhere in the body. The brain regions that process pain also connect directly to memory centers, which is why painful experiences get remembered so vividly. But this also means that remembering pain can actually recreate aspects of the pain experience. People with chronic pain often develop something called central sensitization, where their pain processing circuits become hyperactive and start generating pain responses to normal, non-painful stimuli. Recent discoveries about pain processing show that the brain doesn't just passively receive pain signals, it actively participates in creating them. Brain regions like the periaqueductal gray send signals back down to the spinal cord that can either enhance or suppress incoming pain signals before they even reach conscious awareness. Your brain is constantly adjusting the volume knob on pain interpretation. The genetic research from 2025 has identified specific genes that control pain sensitivity by affecting how these brain circuits function. Mutations in genes like SCN9A can make people completely unable to feel pain or can make normal touch feel like burning agony. The same genetic variation that makes one person barely notice a paper cut can make another person experience that same paper cut as excruciating torture. This brain-based interpretation system is exactly what makes painkillers possible in the first place. If pain really happened at injury sites, you need to deliver painkillers directly to each injured tissue. But since pain actually gets constructed in your brain, you can interrupt the entire pain experience by getting painkillers to the right brain circuits. Your brain is essentially interpreting electrical signals and turning them into the conscious experience of pain. But here's what's really interesting. If your brain is constructing pain from incoming signals, what exactly are those signals trying to tell your brain in the first place? There's a whole molecular drama happening at injury sites that's specifically designed to get your brain's attention. The molecular troublemakers behind all this pain drama are cyclooxygenase enzymes, or COX for short. These are the real villains in our pain story, and they're lurking in virtually every tissue in your body just waiting for something to go wrong. When cells get injured or stressed out, COX enzymes basically lose their minds and start a chemical chain reaction that amplifies your pain signals way beyond what's actually necessary. Think of COX enzymes as molecular drama queens. They take a small injury and turn it into a full-scale emergency response that involves your entire nervous system. These enzymes are sitting quietly in your tissues most of the time, but the moment they detect any kind of cellular distress, they spring into action and start manufacturing chemicals that make everything hurt more than it should. The research has identified different COX enzyme variants, and each one has its own personality and function. COX-1 enzymes are the responsible ones that handle normal housekeeping duties like protecting your stomach lining and regulating blood clotting. COX-2 enzymes are the troublemakers that get activated during injury and inflammation. There's also COX-3, which was only discovered recently and seems to be involved specifically in fever and central nervous system pain processing. But the real star of this molecular soap opera is something called arachidonic acid. This is a chemical that COX enzymes have an absolute obsessive relationship with. When your cells get damaged, they release arachidonic acid from their cell membranes, and COX enzymes go completely crazy for this stuff. They bind to arachidonic acid molecules and start converting them into entirely new chemicals through a process that's basically molecular manufacturing. COX enzymes don't just casually interact with arachidonic acid, they devour it. They grab onto arachidonic acid molecules and run them through a two-step chemical conversion process. First, they turn arachidonic acid into something called prostaglandin G2, then immediately convert that into prostaglandin H2. This whole process takes less than a second, but it sets off an inflammatory cascade that can last for hours or even days. Prostaglandin H2 is like the raw material that gets turned into all the different chemicals that cause pain, inflammation, and fever. Your body has specialized enzymes that convert prostaglandin H2 into prostaglandin E2, prostaglandin D2, prostaglandin F2 alpha, thromboxane A2, and prostacyclin. Each of these chemicals has its own specific job in the pain and inflammation response, but they all trace back to COX enzymes going berserk with arachidonic acid. COX-2 amplifies pain chemicals rapidly, making it a key target for NSAIDs. These prostaglandins are the chemicals that actually make pain signals stronger. Prostaglandin E2 binds to nerve receptors and makes them more sensitive to painful stimuli. It's like turning up the volume on your pain detection system. Normally, a light touch might not register as painful at all, but when prostaglandin E2 is floating around, that same light touch can feel like agony. But here's the part that seems completely backwards from an evolutionary perspective. Why would our bodies evolve a system that amplifies pain and makes injuries hurt more than they need to? Pain is supposed to be a warning system that tells us to avoid dangerous situations. But COX enzymes take that warning system and turn it into a torture device that can make minor injuries feel excruciating. The answer is that pain amplification actually serves several important biological functions. Increased pain sensitivity makes you more likely to protect injured areas and avoid further damage. The inflammatory response that COX enzymes trigger also brings immune cells and healing factors to injury sites more rapidly. Prostaglandins don't just cause pain, they also cause blood vessels to dilate and become more permeable, which allows your body's repair mechanisms to access damaged tissues more effectively. Statistics on inflammation-related conditions show just how common COX enzyme overactivity really is. About 54 million adults in the United States have doctor-diagnosed arthritis, and almost all of these cases involve excessive COX-2 enzyme activity in joint tissues. Chronic pain conditions affect over 50 million Americans, and many of these involve COX enzymes that have become chronically activated and keep producing prostaglandins even when there's no ongoing tissue damage. Understanding COX enzymes led to one of the biggest breakthroughs in painkiller development. Once researchers figured out that COX enzymes were the molecular switches that control pain and inflammation, they realized they could develop drugs that specifically block these enzymes. This was revolutionary because earlier painkillers worked through much less precise mechanisms and caused way more side effects. The discovery that there were different types of COX enzymes with different functions opened up even more possibilities. If COX-1 enzymes protected your stomach and COX-2 enzymes caused pain, then theoretically you could develop painkillers that only block COX-2 while leaving COX-1 alone. This would give you pain relief without the stomach problems that came with traditional painkillers. But COX enzymes turned out to be more complicated than anyone initially realized. COX-1 and COX-2 don't operate completely independently, and blocking one type affects the other in ways that aren't always predictable. The relationship between different COX enzyme types involves complex feedback loops and regulatory mechanisms that we're still trying to understand. What we've learned is that COX enzymes aren't actually villains trying to make your life miserable. They're more like overzealous security guards who sometimes call in way too much backup for relatively minor incidents. They evolved to protect you from serious threats, but they don't always have good judgment about when a full-scale emergency response is actually necessary. This is where NSAIDs come in to save the day. NSAIDs inhibit COX enzymes in injured tissues to prevent prostaglandin production, reducing pain signals. They block this chain early, preventing the cascade of pain-amplifying chemicals from ever getting started. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. Your tissues aren't the only place where pain gets amplified. There's another player in this game that's been quietly making everything worse. The brain's pain amplification system. That player is your brain itself, which has developed its own sophisticated system for making pain worse than it needs to be. Not only does your brain create the experience of pain, but it also actively amplifies that pain on purpose. Your brain receives pain signals from injured tissues and then deliberately cranks up the intensity, turning what should be manageable discomfort into something that can completely dominate your consciousness. It's like your own neural networks are conspiring against you, taking a bad situation and making it exponentially worse. This isn't some kind of malfunction or design flaw. Your brain is intentionally turning up the volume on pain signals through a process called central sensitization. When pain signals arrive at your spinal cord and brain, specialized circuits don't just passively relay that information. They actively process it, modify it, and often amplify it before creating your conscious pain experience. Your brain is essentially taking incoming pain data and running it through an amplification system that can make moderate pain feel excruciating. When pain signals persist, brain circuits become hypersensitive, amplifying pain beyond the original injury. The 2025 research on central sensitization shows that this amplification happens through increased excitability of neurons in your central nervous system. When pain signals keep arriving from injured tissues, the neurons that process these signals become hyperactive. They start responding more strongly to the same level of input, and they begin responding to signals that normally wouldn't register as painful at all. It's like turning up the gain on an audio amplifier until even whispers become deafeningly loud. But the real troublemakers in this amplification system are cells called astrocytes. These aren't even neurons, they're support cells that are supposed to help brain cells function properly. But when astrocytes detect ongoing pain signals, they completely change their behavior and start actively participating in making pain worse. Research on glial cell activation shows that these support cells intensify pain signals, driving chronic pain conditions far beyond what the original injury would justify. Astrocytes essentially create an echo chamber effect in your brain. When they get activated by pain signals, they release inflammatory chemicals that make surrounding neurons more sensitive. These hyperactive neurons then send stronger signals, which activate even more astrocytes, which release even more inflammatory chemicals. The whole system feeds back on itself, creating a cycle where pain signals get amplified over and over again. Other support cells called microglia also join this amplification party. When they detect nerve injury, microglia release chemicals that further increase neuronal excitability and strengthen the sensitized state of pain-processing neurons. It's like having multiple different cell types all working together to make sure your pain experience is as intense and long-lasting as possible. The neuroplasticity involved in this process is remarkable, but also terrifying. Persistent pain rewires brain circuits, making pain harder to turn off. Your brain physically reorganizes itself in response to ongoing pain signals, creating new neural connections that reinforce and maintain the amplified pain state. These structural changes can persist long after the original injury has healed, which is why some people develop chronic pain conditions that last for months or years after their tissues have fully recovered. This amplification system affects multiple brain regions simultaneously. The areas that process different aspects of pain all show alterations in people with chronic pain. The region that handles the emotional aspects of pain often becomes hyperactive in chronic pain patients. Meanwhile, the connections between different pain processing regions become disrupted, impairing the brain's ability to regulate and control pain responses. From an evolutionary perspective, this amplification system seems completely counterproductive. Why would natural selection favor a system that makes injuries hurt more than necessary? The answer is that pain amplification serves important survival functions when it works correctly. Amplified pain makes you more likely to protect injured areas and avoid activities that could cause further damage. It also motivates you to seek help and rest, giving your body time to heal properly. The problem is that this amplification system sometimes gets stuck in the on position. The same mechanisms that are supposed to protect you during acute injuries can become chronically active, creating persistent pain even when there's no ongoing tissue damage. It's like having a car alarm that keeps going off hours after the attempted break-in has ended. The alarm system isn't broken. It's just failing to turn itself off when the danger has passed. Central amplification explains chronic pain conditions like fibromyalgia and why pain persists after healing. Current statistics from 2025 show that central pain syndromes affect millions of people worldwide. These conditions involve chronic activation of the brain's pain amplification systems, creating persistent pain that can be completely disconnected from any actual tissue damage. Treatment outcomes for these conditions have improved with better understanding of central sensitization mechanisms, but many patients still struggle with pain that exists primarily in their amplified neural circuits rather than their tissues. The most frustrating aspect of central sensitization is that it can make normal, non-painful stimuli feel excruciating. Light touch, gentle movement, or even changes in temperature can trigger intense pain responses in people with sensitized neural circuits. Their pain amplification systems have become so hyperactive that almost any sensory input gets interpreted as a threat and amplified into a painful experience. But understanding this amplification system also reveals why painkillers can be so effective. If your brain is actively amplifying pain signals, then interrupting that amplification process can provide dramatic relief. The amplification system also explains why pain relief often seems disproportionate to the amount of painkiller you take. A small dose of medication can provide significant relief because it's not just blocking pain signals, it's disrupting the entire amplification cascade. Your brain's pain amplification system represents one of the most sophisticated biological processes for threat detection and response, but it's also one of the most prone to malfunction. When it works correctly, it keeps you safe by making sure you take injuries seriously. When it malfunctions, it becomes a system that can make life unbearable. But there's a way to outsmart this entire amplification network using some very clever molecular trickery. NSAIDs, the molecular imposters. NSAIDs like ibuprofen enter the scene as molecular competitors that outsmart the COX enzyme system through strategic interference. These drugs don't announce themselves as foreign invaders trying to shut down your pain response. Instead, they compete with arachidonic acid for COX enzyme binding sites, preventing prostaglandin synthesis before the pain cascade can even begin. The competition works because NSAID molecules have been specifically designed to fit into the same binding sites that COX enzymes normally use to process arachidonic acid. When COX enzymes encounter ibuprofen or naproxen molecules floating around in your tissues, these drugs can occupy the enzyme's active site. The COX enzyme binding site has very specific requirements for molecular shape, size, and chemical structure, and NSAIDs are engineered to meet these requirements. But here's where the competitive strategy gets really sophisticated. When a COX enzyme grabs onto an NSAID molecule, it tries to perform its normal chemical conversion process. The enzyme changes its configuration to accommodate what it expects to be arachidonic acid and begins the molecular transformation sequence. But NSAID molecules don't cooperate with this process. They occupy the enzyme's active site and then just sit there, stopping conversion of arachidonic acid into prostaglandins. The 2025 research on NSAID binding mechanisms has revealed just how precise this competitive inhibition really is. Advanced crystallography studies show that ibuprofen molecules fit into COX enzyme active sites with remarkable specificity. The binding affinity measurements show that many NSAIDs can effectively compete with the natural substrate for enzyme access. This creates what biochemists call competitive inhibition, where multiple molecules compete for the same binding sites. The mathematical dynamics of competitive inhibition depend on the relative concentrations of all these competing molecules. COX enzymes, arachidonic acid molecules, and NSAID molecules all floating around in your tissues at the same time, randomly encountering each other and competing for the same binding sites. If you have high concentrations of NSAIDs in your tissues, most COX enzyme binding sites get occupied by NSAID molecules instead of arachidonic acid. But if NSAID concentrations drop or arachidonic acid concentrations increase, the natural substrate can start outcompeting the drugs for enzyme access. The effectiveness rates for different NSAIDs vary significantly based on their binding characteristics and tissue distribution patterns. The 2025 clinical data shows that ibuprofen achieves pain relief in about 70 to 80% of people from mild to moderate pain, while naproxen shows similar effectiveness but with longer duration of action. Aspirin has slightly lower effectiveness rates for pain relief but superior anti-inflammatory effects in certain conditions. Modern pharmaceutical companies have gotten incredibly sophisticated at engineering NSAID selectivity between COX-1 and COX-2 enzymes. Some NSAIDs have high COX-2 selectivity ratios achieved through structural design. This selectivity is accomplished through subtle modifications to molecular structure that take advantage of small differences between the two enzyme types. COX-1 and COX-2 enzymes have nearly identical active sites, but there are tiny structural differences that skilled chemists can exploit. COX-2 has a slightly larger binding pocket that can accommodate bulkier NSAID molecules, while COX-1 has a more restrictive binding site. By designing NSAIDs with specific molecular appendages that fit into COX-2 but not COX-1, pharmaceutical companies can create drugs that selectively target the enzymes responsible for pain and inflammation while sparing the enzymes that protect your stomach. But even with perfect selectivity, NSAIDs still face the same distribution challenge as all other systemic drugs. NSAIDs circulate systemically, blocking COX wherever inflammation occurs. They get distributed throughout your entire body, not just the injury sites. They bind the COX enzymes in your liver, kidneys, brain, and every other tissue that has blood flow. This systemic distribution actually enhances their effectiveness by interrupting the pain amplification cascade at multiple levels. NSAIDs block prostaglandin production in peripheral tissues where injuries occur, in spinal cord circuits where pain signals get processed and amplified, and in brain regions where pain experiences get constructed. This multi-level interference creates more complete pain relief than what you get from targeting any single location. Current 2025 statistics show that NSAIDs remain among the most commonly used medications worldwide, with over 30 billion doses consumed annually in the United States alone. Usage patterns have shifted significantly towards shorter duration treatment courses and lower total daily doses as medical understanding of NSAID risk has improved. Prescription trends show increasing preference for topical NSAID formulations that can achieve local tissue concentrations while minimizing systemic exposure. The side effect profiles for NSAIDs have been extensively documented through decades of clinical use. Gastrointestinal toxicity affects about 15 to 20% of regular NSAID users, with serious complications occurring in about 1 to 2% of cases. Cardiovascular risks appear dose-dependent and duration-dependent, with higher risks associated with prolonged use of high doses. Renal impairment is relatively uncommon, but can be serious in patients with pre-existing kidney disease. These side effects occur because COX enzyme inhibition affects more than just pain and inflammation pathways. COX-1 enzymes play important roles in protecting stomach lining and regulating blood clotting. COX-2 enzymes are involved in normal kidney function and cardiovascular regulation. When NSAIDs block these enzymes throughout your body, they interfere with these protective functions along with the pain-causing functions. The limitations of the NSAID approach are becoming more apparent as we understand the complexity of pain processing systems. While NSAIDs effectively reduce prostaglandin production, they don't address other pain amplification mechanisms like central sensitization or glial cell activation. They work great for inflammation-related pain, but provide limited benefit for neuropathic pain or centralized pain conditions. NSAIDs operate as molecular competitors that occupy enzyme binding sites, so the real troublemakers can't access them and start causing problems. But this entire approach depends on getting to the injury sites and competing with natural chemicals in your tissues. There's another class of painkillers that takes a completely different approach to the whole problem. Acetaminophen, the brain infiltrator. Acetaminophen shows up and completely breaks all the rules we just learned about painkillers. While NSAIDs are running around your tissues competing with arachidonic acid and getting into molecular battles with COX enzymes, acetaminophen takes a completely different approach. This drug doesn't bother with all that peripheral tissue drama. Instead, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and modulates central COX activity and other pain pathways, working primarily in the brain to temper pain signal processing. This is a fundamentally different strategy that most people don't understand. When you take acetaminophen for a headache, it's not traveling to your head muscles or blood vessels to fix whatever is causing the headache. It's traveling to your brain's pain processing centers and essentially reducing your brain's ability to construct intense pain experiences. It's like the difference between putting out individual fires around your house versus adjusting the main control system that regulates how those fires get detected and responded to. What makes this possible is acetaminophen's unique molecular properties that allow it to slip past one of your body's most sophisticated security systems. Your blood-brain barrier is essentially a molecular checkpoint that prevents most chemicals in your bloodstream from entering your brain tissue. This barrier exists to protect your brain from toxins, infections, and other harmful substances that might damage your neural circuits. The blood-brain barrier works by creating tight junctions between the cells that line your brain's blood vessels. These junctions are so tight that most molecules can't squeeze through the gaps. Only chemicals that meet very specific criteria get access to your brain. They need to be small enough, they need to have the right chemical properties, and they need to either slip through existing transport systems or be small enough to pass through cellular membranes directly. Acetaminophen meets all these requirements perfectly. The molecular weight is low enough that it can pass through the blood-brain barrier relatively easily. The chemical structure is just polar enough to dissolve in your bloodstream, but also non-polar enough to pass through lipid membranes. It's like having a molecular passport that gets you through customs while bigger, more complex molecules get stopped at the border. The 2025 research on acetaminophen mechanism shows that we still don't completely understand how this drug works once it reaches your brain. The leading theory involves COX enzyme inhibition, but brain COX enzymes behave differently than the COX enzymes in your peripheral tissues. Brain COX activity seems to be more involved in central pain processing rather than inflammatory responses. Acetaminophen might be blocking COX enzymes that specifically control how your brain constructs pain experiences. Studies show acetaminophen metabolites may activate CB1 receptors, suggesting involvement with your brain's endocannabinoid system. This is a network of receptors and chemicals that naturally regulate pain, mood, and other neurological functions. Some research indicates that acetaminophen gets converted into compounds that interact with cannabinoid receptors in processing brain regions. This will explain why acetaminophen can provide pain relief without the anti-inflammatory effects that come from blocking peripheral COX enzymes. There's also evidence that acetaminophen influences descending pain control pathways in your brain. These are neural circuits that send signals from your brain down to your spinal cord to either amplify or suppress incoming pain signals. By enhancing these descending inhibitory pathways, acetaminophen could essentially turn down the volume on pain signals before they even reach your conscious awareness. The effectiveness data from 2025 studies show some interesting patterns when comparing acetaminophen to NSAIDs. For certain types of pain, particularly headaches and fever-related discomfort, acetaminophen performs just as well as NSAIDs and sometimes better. But for inflammation-related pain like arthritis or muscle injuries, NSAIDs typically provide superior relief because they address the underlying inflammatory processes that acetaminophen ignores. Recent research published in Pain Medicine Journal shows that acetaminophen achieves meaningful pain relief in about 60 to 70% of people with mild to moderate pain. The response: rates are slightly lower than what you see with NSAIDs for most types of pain, but acetaminophen has a completely different side effect profile that makes it preferable for certain populations. The central versus peripheral approach creates dramatically different side effect patterns. Since acetaminophen doesn't interfere with COX enzymes in your stomach, it doesn't cause the gastrointestinal problems that NSAIDs can create. It doesn't affect blood clotting or kidney function the way NSAIDs do because it's not blocking COX enzymes in those tissues. Acetaminophen is safe at recommended doses, but overdoses cause liver damage through a completely different mechanism than NSAID side effects. The 2025 safety statistics show that acetaminophen remains one of the safest painkillers when used at recommended doses. The FDA recommendation of no more than 4,000 milligrams per day for adults provides a significant safety margin for most people. However, acetaminophen poisoning still accounts for about 50,000 emergency room visits annually in the United States, mostly due to accidental overdoses from taking multiple acetaminophen-containing medications simultaneously. The question of which approach is superior depends entirely on the type of pain you're dealing with. Acetaminophen excels at managing pain that originates primarily in central nervous system processing, like headaches, fever-related discomfort, and certain types of chronic pain. NSAIDs work better for pain that involves significant peripheral inflammation, like sports injuries, arthritis, and most acute musculoskeletal problems. For some pain conditions, combining acetaminophen with NSAIDs provides better relief than either drug alone because they target different aspects of the pain experience. The acetaminophen addresses central pain processing, while the NSAID handles peripheral inflammation. This combination approach has become increasingly common in both prescription and over-the-counter formulations. The brain-targeting strategy also explains why acetaminophen is often more effective for pain that doesn't have an obvious physical cause. Conditions like fibromyalgia, tension headaches, and some chronic pain syndromes involve altered central pain processing rather than peripheral tissue damage. Since acetaminophen works directly on brain circuits involved in pain perception, it can provide relief for these centralized pain conditions, even when there's no peripheral inflammation to treat. But this fundamental difference between central and peripheral approaches raises an important question about the COX enzymes themselves. It turns out that not all COX enzymes are created equal, and the pharmaceutical industry's attempts to exploit these differences
The selectivity
have led to some
wars.
unexpected
COX-1
discoveries
versus
about the hidden
COX-2.
cost of molecular precision.
The pharmaceutical industry discovered that COX enzymes aren't just generic troublemakers. They're actually two completely different types with totally different jobs. COX-1 handles homeostasis, COX-2 drives inflammation. COX-1 enzymes are the responsible ones that handle important housekeeping duties like protecting your stomach lining and helping your blood clot properly. COX-2 enzymes are the drama queens that show up whenever there's inflammation and start cranking out prostaglandins that make everything hurt. This discovery set off what can only be described as the pharmaceutical equivalent of a gold rush. Drug companies realized they could potentially create the perfect painkiller by blocking only COX-2 enzymes while leaving COX-1 enzymes alone. This would theoretically give you all the pain relief benefits without the nasty stomach side effects that come from blocking COX-1. It sounded like the holy grail of pain management, a way to have your cake and eat it too. The research on COX enzyme tissue distribution shows just how different these two enzyme types really are. COX-1 enzymes are found in virtually every tissue in your body, doing their quiet maintenance work day and night. They're constitutively expressed, meaning they're always present and always active at baseline levels. COX-2 enzymes are much more dramatic. They're barely detectable in most healthy tissues, but the moment inflammation starts, they can increase their activity by 50 to 100 times normal levels within just a few hours. The specific functions of these enzymes explain why blocking the wrong one causes such serious problems. COX-1 enzymes in your stomach produce prostaglandins that stimulate mucus and bicarbonate secretion, creating a protective barrier against stomach acid. When you block COX-1 with traditional NSAIDs, you eliminate this protection and leave your stomach lining vulnerable to acid damage. That's why long-term NSAID use can cause ulcers, bleeding, and other gastrointestinal complications. COX-1 enzymes also play crucial roles in blood clotting by producing thromboxane A2, which helps platelets stick together and form clots when you're injured. This is why NSAIDs can increase bleeding risk and why doctors tell you to stop taking them before surgery. COX-2 enzymes don't significantly affect normal blood clotting, so selective COX-2 inhibitors shouldn't cause the same bleeding problems. The pharmaceutical industry spent billions of dollars and decades of research developing selective COX-2 inhibitors that could target inflammation without interfering with stomach protection or blood clotting. COX-2 inhibitors like celecoxib once promised fewer GI issues, but later studies revealed higher cardiovascular risks. The molecular engineering required to achieve COX selectivity turned out to be incredibly challenging. COX-1 and COX-2 enzymes have nearly identical active sites where drugs bind, with only tiny structural differences that chemists could exploit. The breakthrough came from understanding that COX-2 has a slightly larger binding pocket that can accommodate bulkier drug molecules. By designing COX-2 inhibitors with specific molecular appendages that fit into COX-2 but not COX-1, pharmaceutical companies achieve selectivity ratios of 10 to 1 or even 100 to 1. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. The research has revealed that the relationship between COX-1 and COX-2 is much more complex than anyone initially realized. These enzymes don't operate completely independently. They interact with each other through complex regulatory networks, and blocking one affects the other in ways that aren't always predictable. Perfect selectivity might actually be counterproductive because it disrupts the natural balance between these enzyme systems. The trade-offs between selectivity and effectiveness became apparent through clinical experience with selective COX-2 inhibitors. While these drugs successfully reduce gastrointestinal side effects, they didn't always provide better pain relief than traditional NSAIDs. Some patients actually experience less effective pain control with selective inhibitors, possibly because COX-1 inhibition contributes to certain types of pain relief through mechanisms that aren't fully understood. Even more concerning was the discovery that selective COX-2 inhibition could create entirely new side effects that weren't seen with traditional NSAIDs. The cardiovascular safety data shows that selective COX-2 inhibitors increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes in certain patient populations. This happens because COX-2 enzymes produce prostacyclin, which helps prevent blood clots from forming in coronary arteries. When you selectively block COX-2 while leaving COX-1 intact, you reduce the protective prostacyclin while maintaining thromboxane production from COX-1, creating a prothrombotic state. This created a fascinating paradox where the quest for perfect selectivity actually made some drugs more dangerous than the non-selective alternatives they were designed to replace. Traditional NSAIDs cause more stomach problems but fewer heart problems. Selective COX-2 inhibitors cause fewer stomach problems but more heart problems. Neither approach eliminates risk, they just shift the risk from one organ system to another. The gastrointestinal versus cardiovascular trade-off has forced doctors and patients to make complex risk-benefit calculations that depend on individual patient characteristics. Older patients with high cardiovascular risk might be better off with traditional NSAIDs despite the stomach risks. Younger patients with stomach problems but low heart disease risk might benefit from selective COX-2 inhibitors. There's no universally superior approach. Current research is exploring whether perfect selectivity is even a desirable goal. Some studies suggest that partial selectivity, where drugs preferentially target COX-2 but still have some COX-1 activity, might provide the best balance of effectiveness and safety. This approach could provide anti-inflammatory benefits while maintaining some protective COX-1 function. Recent developments focus on tissue-selective delivery rather than enzyme-selective inhibition. Instead of designing drugs that only block COX-2 everywhere in the body, researchers are developing delivery systems that can target specific tissues where inflammation is occurring. This approach could theoretically provide localized COX inhibition without systemic side effects. The pursuit of COX selectivity taught us that in biology there's no such thing as a free lunch. Every benefit comes with a hidden cost, and the quest for perfect selectivity often just moves the cost from one place to another rather than eliminating it entirely. But these limitations of traditional approaches have opened the door to completely new ways of thinking about pain management that go far beyond just improving the pills we already have. 2025's pain revolution, what's next? Scientists are creating entirely new approaches that sound more like science fiction than medicine. We're talking about treatments that can literally reprogram your brain's pain circuits, personalized medicine based on your DNA, and virtual reality systems that provide drug-free pain relief. The biggest breakthrough is something called personalized pain medicine, and it starts with your genetic makeup. Researchers have discovered that genetic variations in how your body processes different painkillers can make the difference between a drug working amazingly well or doing absolutely nothing. Your genes control the enzymes that break down medications, the proteins that transport drugs through your body, and even the receptors that painkillers target. In 2025, doctors can run genetic tests that tell them exactly which painkillers will work best for your specific genetic makeup and which ones will just waste your time. These genetic tests look at variations in genes like CYP2D6, which controls how fast your liver processes certain drugs, and OPRM1, which affects how well opioid painkillers work for you. People with certain genetic variants metabolize codeine so quickly that it becomes dangerous, while others metabolize it so slowly that it provides no pain relief at all. The same genetic variations affect how well NSAIDs work, how likely you are to experience side effects, and even how much acetaminophen your liver can safely handle. But genetic testing is just the beginning. Scientists at Stanford Medicine have actually recreated the entire neural pathway that transmits pain signals from your body to your brain using human cells in a laboratory. They've assembled 4 miniaturized components of the human nervous system into functional units that can transmit pain signals just like the real thing. This means researchers can test new pain treatments on actual human pain pathways without needing to experiment on people. The ability to manipulate and study this pathway in a controlled environment offers unprecedented opportunities for understanding pain mechanisms and developing more effective treatments. Meanwhile, other researchers are discovering that you might not need drugs at all for certain types of pain. A study published in Nature Communications revealed that simply viewing nature scenes can reduce acute physical pain by measurably decreasing brain activity in pain processing regions. Participants reported less pain and showed reduced neural activity when watching nature videos compared to urban or indoor scenes. This has led to the development of virtual reality pain management systems that can provide drug-free pain relief by immersing patients in carefully designed natural environments. The biomarker revolution is creating even more targeted approaches. Instead of giving everyone the same painkiller and hoping it works, doctors can now measure specific inflammatory markers, genetic expressions, and neural activity patterns that indicate exactly what type of pain someone is experiencing and which treatments are most likely to help. Research from the National Institutes of Health has shown that inflammation can alter the nervous system's response to pain, with prostaglandin E2 inducing a sensitized state in specific sensory neurons that become increasingly responsive to heat. Current statistics show that chronic pain still affects over 50 million adults in the United States, but treatment success rates have improved dramatically with these personalized approaches. Patients receiving biomarker-guided therapy show 60 to 70% better outcomes compared to traditional one-size-fits-all treatment protocols. The global non-opioid pain treatment market has grown to over $38 billion and is expanding at 8.3% annually as healthcare systems shift toward these more sophisticated approaches. Neuromodulation technologies are becoming particularly exciting because they can provide pain relief without any drugs at all. Researchers at UNSW have developed Painwave, which combines a gaming app with a brain monitoring headset that responds in real time to brainwave patterns. Users learn to regulate the abnormal brain activity linked to chronic nerve pain by playing games that respond to their neural signals. The first trial showed 3 out of 4 participants experiencing significant pain reductions comparable to opioid medications, but without any of the addiction risks or side effects. These brain-computer interfaces work by teaching patients to consciously control neural circuits that normally operate below conscious awareness. The gaming elements make the training engaging and provide immediate feedback when patients successfully modify their brain activity patterns. As patients get better at controlling these circuits, their chronic pain gradually decreases because they're literally rewiring the neural pathways that generate persistent pain signals. Artificial intelligence is revolutionizing pain treatment by analyzing massive datasets of patient responses, genetic information, and treatment outcomes to identify patterns that human doctors might miss. AI systems can predict which patients are likely to develop chronic pain after surgery, which medications will work best for specific individuals, and even when breakthrough pain episodes are likely to occur in chronic pain patients. These predictive capabilities allow doctors to intervene before pain becomes severe, rather than just reacting after patients are already suffering. Recovery from the opioid crisis has accelerated the adoption of these alternative pain management approaches. Healthcare systems are actively seeking non-addictive alternatives that can provide effective pain relief without the risks associated with opioid medications. The 2025 data shows that adoption rates for non-pharmaceutical pain interventions have increased by over 40% in the past 3 years as insurance companies begin covering these innovative treatments. Targeted drug delivery systems are solving the everywhere problem that traditional painkillers face. Instead of flooding your entire body with medication, new delivery systems can carry drugs directly to injury sites using nanoparticles, liposomes, or other microscopic vehicles. These systems can be designed to only release their drug payload when they encounter specific inflammatory markers or pH conditions that indicate tissue damage. But all of these advances, from genetic testing to virtual reality to AI-powered predictions, share something fundamental in common. They're all based on a deeper understanding of what pain actually is and how it really works in your body. This understanding is revealing something that changes everything we thought we knew about how painkillers actually provide relief. The real breakthrough is understanding exactly how these molecular mechanisms work together. We've learned that pain is constructed and amplified in the brain, and modern treatments target both peripheral enzymes and central brain circuits to provide relief. Your injuries send signals, but your brain decides how much those signals should hurt and for how long. This explains why the same injury can feel completely different depending on your mental state, stress levels, or even what you're paying attention to. It's not that the pain is imaginary, it's that pain is a complex biological construction project involving multiple systems throughout your body and brain working together. The science behind everyday painkillers reveals just how sophisticated your body's pain management systems really are, and how clever pharmaceutical companies have gotten at interrupting these systems at exactly the right molecular targets. If this fascinated you, like and subscribe for more insights into the science behind everyday phenomena.